Okay, good morning everyone and welcome to this meeting of Mid-Suffolk District Council Cabinet. I'm Councillor Andy Mellon, Leader of Mid-Suffolk District Council, and I'll be chairing this meeting. May I first remind you of some domestic arrangements. Please ensure that your microphones are turned off when not in use. Please do not interrupt other speakers. If you're attending the meeting to speak and persistently interrupt the meeting, you may be asked to leave. Please ensure that your mobile phones are on silent or switched off. And additionally, for Cabinet members, we will be using e-voting for this meeting on the modern.gov app. And I'd like to remind everyone present that this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of repeated viewing. The whole of the meeting will be filmed except where there are confidential or exempt items. And we do have one of those today. If you make a representation to the meeting, you will be deemed by the Council to have consented to being filmed. By entering this meeting as a speaker, you're also consenting to being recorded by the Council and to the possible use of those images and sound recordings for webcasting and or training purposes. Finally, the Council, members of the public and the press may record, film, photograph or broadcast this meeting when the public and press are not lawfully excluded. And if you're intending to do so, please could you inform the committee clerk. So we move to the agenda. Item 1 is apologies for absence.
None received, Chair.
Thank you. Item 2 is to receive declarations of pecuniary, other registrable or non-registrable interests by members. Are there any to declare? No? Okay, thank you. Item 3. This is paper MCA/26/1 to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 10th of March 2026. That was the last meeting of the Cabinet. Are there any points regarding the accuracy of the minutes? If not, can I have a proposer, please? Councillor Winch and Councillor Weller as a seconder. Thank you. The Governance Officer will now conduct the vote.
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now in progress. Councillor Weller, would you like me to take your vote verbally?
4.
Thank you. Councillor Stringer, would you like me to take your vote verbally? Thank you, Chair. That is 6 votes for and 1 abstention, so that's carried.
Thank you. So those minutes are agreed and I'll sign them at the end of the meeting. Item 4 is to receive notifications of petitions in accordance with the Council's petitions scheme.
None received, Chair.
Thank you. Item 5, questions by councillors.
None received, Chair.
And then item 6, matters referred by the Overview and Scrutiny or Joint Audit and Standards Committees.
There are no matters referred, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Item 7 is the forthcoming decisions list. I'm sure we've had a chance to have a look at that. Are there any comments on the forthcoming decisions list? All happy? Okay. So we move on to item 8. This is paper MCA/26/2, the Housing Revenue Account Financial Outturn for 2025-26. And we've got various officers here to support this item. I will now invite the Cabinet Member for Finance and Resources to introduce the report. Councillor Pearson.
Thank you, Chair. Right, before introducing this report, I would like to draw your attention to the table paper which amends the wording of paragraph 4.3 in the report. This clarifies and corrects the explanation regarding the favourable variance in expenditure on repairs and maintenance when comparing outturn with original budget. The budget set for the year 25-26 showed a projected deficit of £2.1 million. Over the past 3 quarters, however, this has shown some improvement, with a projected deficit at the end of quarter 3 of just under £2 million. However, with the 4th quarter outturn, the position has improved significantly, with a final deficit for the 25-26 year of £433,000. Because the analysis of the variance in the second table in Appendix A is set out in a different format to the first table, it's not always easy to identify how the commentary relates to the first table. But the 2 tables do reconcile, I can assure you of that. So they reconcile, the totals are different, but the second table doesn't include reference to income or bad debt provision, cost of financing and depreciation, but it sets out the variances and the reasons for them in respect of all the other items. So I will reference the second table from now on in what I say. The most significant factors giving rise to the reduction in the projected deficit are an underspend on repairs of £491,000. This is due in part to delays in getting contracts established and up and running, and it must also be borne in mind that there was an additional one-off amount of £1 million added to the budget for 25-26 in order to facilitate accelerated repair work, and around half of that has been spent. The next item is the housing rechargeable works budget error of £544,000. This was due to a problem with getting detail into the Unit 4 accounting system, and as a result the recharge was significantly understated in the 25-26 budget, and this is the correcting figure. The problem that gave rise to this has been rectified in the 26-27 budget. Favourable variance of £688,000 in respect of interest payable. This has arisen because there was no additional borrowing needed in 25-26 due to the reduction in the amount of spend in the capital programme, which I'll come on to in a minute, and the fact that it was possible to use capital receipts to fund the capital works undertaken. Consequently, there's a reduction in the interest payable as compared to the original budgeted figure. These savings, totalling £1.7 million, are offset by a pressure of £421,000 arising from increased works dealing with damp and mould in properties. Turning to the capital programme, the original budget for the year was a spending of £24.6 million. At quarter 3, this figure was revised to £14.3 million, and the final outturn is a total of £11.2 million. Work on kitchens has been delayed due to contractor capacity issues and on roofing and drainage because of new contracts being negotiated. Expenditure on this work has been carried forward to 26-27, the current year. The second significant item is the roofing work where there were, delays in negotiating contracts. This was known at the time as setting the 26-27 budget and taken into account in the report. The final significant reduction is in the new build and acquisitions programme, where there was a carry forward from the previous year of £6.8 million, which is no longer required, and in addition the development at Paddock House has been delayed. It's always good when outturn matches the original budget because it gives confidence in the budget process, but it's even better when the outturn shows an improvement against the original budget, showing that budgets are on the side of caution. For the HRA account, the improvement for 25-26 of 1.6 million in the deficit from a projected 2.1 million to an actual of £433,000 is very good news. It illustrates the hard work that's been put in by the team to improve the stability of the account, and I applaud them highly for that. I have no hesitation in recommending that we support this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pearson. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Winch, thank you. Right, any questions on the report from Cabinet members? Councillor Winch.
There's a 13.3 million underspent on the capital programme, and some of the explanations for that are in the report. About 8 million of that is down to the new build. Can you expand a bit on what's happened around the new build?
Oh. Sorry. For new build, the main part of this is for new build and acquisitions where there are no available right to buy receipts for acquisitions, and therefore the budget of 4 million can't be used. So that's a large chunk of it. The other items in there are the Mendlesham new build, which is held up legally, so there's a delay on that, but there's no carry forward needed as it's already budgeted for next year. Paddock House we've already mentioned, and then there are one or two other smaller items which there was an underspend and there's no carry forward needed.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from Cabinet members? I've got one from me. Given that we know the housing stock requires significant future investment, how confident can we be that the HRA remains financially sustainable over the medium term?
HRA is always in a somewhat difficult position. Sorry, let me just check back to my notes. There is a requirement still for regulation and the way HRA accounts operate to be reviewed and overhauled. Changes to the right to buy scheme, so there is still review needed of how it will work. But that said, the outturn presented in this report today should, when it's fed into the business plan, indicate that the account stays above minimum reserves for the entire 30-year period, and therefore we can be confident that it's stable at the moment.
Good. Okay, thank you. Any other questions from Cabinet members? Richard, again. Councillor Winch.
We've got a damp and mould budget here of 24k, and we actually spent nearly 450k. Is that just a categorisation issue, or what's the explanation for that?
It's obviously, damp and mould is obviously a significant factor to ensuring homes are at a decent standard. and therefore it's important that remedial work is carried out. In the past, as I understand it, there was no separate account for this work, and therefore figures weren't separately identified. But I'll refer to officers if there's anything you'd like to add to that.
Yeah, if we can have an answer from officers, that'd be helpful. Thank you.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, okay, so up until, well, the last year, we actually didn't really fully understand our damp and mould problem. Now that we've done a lot of work on stock condition surveys, we've now employed 2 separate contractors to work on our damp and mould exclusively in line with Arab's law. The figures and the costs that we're seeing come through are actually more realistic and real to actually what we will be seeing going forward. So I think really historically it's because actually we didn't know what the extent of the issue.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Winch, is that... any other questions from Cabinet members? If not, any questions from other members here? Okay. Councillor Scarr first, then Councillor Caston.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I wanted to sort of focus on the fact that a number of the programmes are delayed due to issues with contractors or contracts, but in particular on the kitchens programme, the delay due to capacity issues, that's quite a major underspend there, 888,000. What steps are being taken to address the issue? I mean, do we have the flexibility to have another contractor on board, or is this an issue which we can deal with the current contractor satisfactorily?
Yeah, so with that, you're right, there is a big underspend previously. So what we do, you may be aware of the extensive work we've done on the compliance side with procuring new contracts with good sets of KPIs and performance criteria. So the kitchen and bathrooms contract is just about to go out for tender. You'll see it on the forthcoming decisions list shortly for discussion. But the way we're going to be working is we will be having 2 contractors in each district. Currently, there's 1 contractor serving the Veyber and Mid Suffolk districts. So we should see some greater performance on that.
Okay. Councillor Caston, you've got a question.
Thank you, Chair. We've actually finished in quite a different place to how we thought we would. Does this affect our 30-year business plan, or are we going to see some of these costs passed on to the next budget and maybe even themselves out over the next 2 or 3 years? Obviously, the ones that are work that's not been carried out, I understand that there's some of it's actual saving.
Will be added into the budget for this current year. I haven't seen a rerun of the business plan yet, but it should mean that it stays stable throughout the 30-year period now. I don't know if officers want to add anything to that.
Yeah, just to confirm, the revenue side, that will have a positive effect on our 30-year business plan, and for the capital side, we are carrying forward the unspent budget, so it will still go back into the programme of works over the 30 years. But this is overall, it's a positive effect on the 30-year business plan.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions? Okay, so we can now open this item up for debate. Who'd like to kick us off? Councillor Winch, thank you.
Yeah, so I just want to try and stand back from the detail of the numbers just to try and see what they're telling us. So obviously in terms of budget, We were budgeting a deficit of 2.1 million, and we actually had a deficit of 433k, so a massive improvement versus budget. And we end up with reserves at the end of the year of 5.8 million, so a much stronger position than we thought. If you look at the 30-year business plan, we already don't go below the minimum reserve position, so this is adding quite a significant factor onto that, so it's giving us a lot more leeway in terms of risk, because things always go wrong. If I look at last year, we actually had an actual deficit of 1.2 million. So we go from an actual last year of 1.2 million to an actual this year deficit of 433k, so a really good, solid improvement. What I like to do is look at the HRA without all the financing charges and look at our income and our expenditure like we were a business, and then worry about the financing afterwards. Our income was about 250k below budget, but our actual operating expenditure was 1.1 million less than budget, which is really good considering we had a very strong operational year. Our numbers were all very good, but we still managed to do that by spending 1.1 million pounds less. And in my mind, I have what is I call it the operating margin. So you take your income, you take off your expenditure, and you have like a notional profit. So in the budget, the operating margin was like 12.9%. We actually did a margin of 17.3%. If we do a margin anywhere near 20%, the whole HRA will break even. So we haven't got a long way to go to get that to break even. The capital spend is a bit of a mixed picture because, as has been pointed out in several questions, we were significantly underspent, which is, it's good news financially, but it's bad news in terms of our commitment to tenants. And as a general statement from an administration point of view, we want us to hit our capital programme because that's what we're aiming to do as an organisation. There are lots of good reasons in here, and there's no point in wasting public money if you haven't got the right contractors and that type of thing. But a very good thing we've managed to do, we're carrying forward about 2.5 million into next year's capital budget, and we've got a capital budget, revised budget for next year of 17.3 million. I think that's something that we could achieve. A really good thing, though, we managed to do this year is we haven't increased our borrowing. So we've managed to do a combination of grant funding for things like decarbonisation and 4.5 million of capital receipts from various things, which means that we haven't increased our borrowing, which means our finance charges aren't escalating. So if I look at the financing charges in next year's budget, they're 5.1 million, because at the time that's what we thought they'd be. But at the end of the year, in this paper, it's 4.3 million. So we've got a significant saving next year on finance charges. So, and also next year's budget has a deficit of 906k. So we've actually had an actual deficit of 433k. So we should, I believe, be able to move the whole thing much nearer a break-even position next year. So I think overall, it's looking a lot more positive than 12 months ago. And I'd like to thank officers for all the work they do on this, because this is a real area of focus for the administration. So thanks for all the work that you've done over the year.
Thank you. Anyone else? Actually, I think Councillor Winch pretty much summed it up very well there. So can I echo his thanks to the officers for a significant transformation over the past year. And I will now ask the governance officer to conduct the vote. In fact, what I'll do first, though, is read out the recommendations. So 3.1, to note the 2025-26 outturn deficit position of 433,000 against a budgeted deficit of 2.108 million. So that's a favourable variance of 1.675 million as shown in Appendix A. Recommendation 3.2, to approve the 2025-26 deficit of 433,000 be funded from the strategic reserve as shown in Appendix C. 3.3, to note the 2025-26 capital programme spend and capital financing of 11.272 million is 13.338 million below the budget of 24,610k as shown in Appendix B. Recommendation 3.4 to approve the carry forwards in the capital programme of 2.55 million from the 2025-6 budget to 2026-27 as per Appendix B. And finally, 3.5 to approve the delegation to the Director of Finance and Procurement and Section 151 Officer in consultation with the Cabinet Member for Finance and Resources to make final changes to the reserve transfer subject to items identified through the Statement of Accounts preparation and audit. And I will now ask the Governance Officer to conduct the vote.
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now in progress. Thank you, Chair. That is 7 votes for. That's unanimous.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we move on to item 9. This is paper MCA/26/3, the General Fund Financial Monitoring 2025-26 outturn. And I'll now ask the Cabinet Member for Finance and Resources to introduce the report. Councillor Pearson.
Thank you, Chair. Right, this paper sets out the final actual figures for the 25-26 year for the General Fund. It's a very comprehensive paper in the explanation of the variances between the budget set out in February 2025, and the final outturn. And I thank officers for that. It's very fully explained, I believe. Because it contains so much detail, I will, in this introduction, focus only on the more significant items. Starting with the revenue account, the budget surplus forecast by the original budget was £2.4 million, whereas the actual outcome is a surplus of £4.6 million, so a favourable variance of £2.25 million. The more significant figures contributing to this are an adverse variance of £939,000 in finance and procurement. This comes from a range of items, one of which is a correction of the previous inclusion of the vacancy management factor of £415,000, which is managed by individual departments and should not therefore be included in the central budget, but was in the last quarter wrongly. The key items in the remaining £524,000 relate to 4 sources. A net pressure of £248,000 in respect of rent for temporary accommodation, a saving of £166,000 arising from refunds from the Shared Revenue Partnership, a pressure of £130,000 arising from business rates collection cost, and a total pressure of £126,000 arriving from overspends on the accounting system, Unit 4, the audit fee and bank charges. The biggest factor in the variance comes in the Place Directorate, where there was £1,075,000 of savings. The most significant contributor to this is the Planning Department, where there were savings on salaries of £375,000 and additional income of £543,000 with minimal spending on appeals needed. Business rates also show a saving of just under £2.5 million. I have to say I still cannot claim to fully understand business rates, but I do know that the Finance Department was joined this year by a business rate specialist, and consequently some adjustments arose in the figures as compared to the original budget. The work that was carried out is reflected in the development of the figures over the year, with variances developing in no variance in quarter one, but in quarter two, a saving of just under £1.5 million was identified. In quarter three, £2.5 million, and that carries through as a saving in quarter four as well. The last item to mention is the item 8 credit recharge from the HRA, which is a pressure on the general fund of £678,000. We've just talked about the HRA and the fact that no additional borrowing was needed this year, and because of that, there is no interest on internal borrowing, which would flow through to the general fund, and so it creates a pressure in the general fund. Finally, there is no effect on this on the surplus line, because it's the dividend from Gateway 14 which goes straight out into reserve, so it has no effect on the bottom line. But the original budget was that the dividend would be £2.9 million, and it was actually, the dividend received was £6 million. So there is a difference on that. The figures shown in the report show total dividends of £6,281,000. The £281,000 was the final dividend received from Mid-Suffolk Growth. For the capital programme, there was an underspend of £12.7 million of the original budget of £36 million. And the major elements of this to be carried forward are described on page 38 and Appendix D of the report. Reserves at the end of the 25-26 year have increased by just under £9 million from the level forecast that was forecast they would be in the 26-27 budget, and this, I believe, is largely due to capital underspends carried forward. All told, this is a very positive outcome for the 25-26 year, and the recommendations in the report are that the additional budget surplus of £2.25 million and the additional £3.1 million of dividend received from Gateway 14 are transferred to the Mid-Suffolk Implementation Reserve. There was a loss. We sold the Schroeder investment in Schroeder during the year, and there was a loss on that investment of £165,000, and the recommendation is that we cover that from the pooled investments reserve, which that reserve is £1 million, so it could come out of that and leave plenty to cover the other pooled investments if need be. A recommendation that £203,000 be transferred to the homelessness reserve to cover costs incurred during the year. And there was income from the EPR, Extended Producer Responsibility Income, received, and to transfer £976,000 of that to the waste reserve to cover costs. And then to approve delegation of authority to the Section 151 Officer Melissa, in consultation with me, to make any changes to these transfers arising from the identified as arising from the accounts preparation and audit, and to approve just over £5 million of capital expenditure to be carried forward to the current year. And then finally, to note the reserves position and the prudential indicators. This is a very good outturn for the year, and I have no hesitation in proposing that we accept these recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pesson. Can we have a seconder, please? Councillor Winch. Thank you. Any questions from Cabinet members on this report? Councillor Winch.
I'm afraid I've got to ask about business rates because the variance is so significant. How confident are we going forward in terms of the stability of those numbers?
I believe that there's been a great deal of work done this year, but I will refer the question to officers.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, we've done an awful lot of work with the new person that started looking after business rates. She's got a real good handle on the numbers. She's working very closely with SRP as well, the Shared Revenues Partnership, in terms of monitoring. So I'm confident now going forward that we'll have a better handle on that. Obviously, there will be some fluctuations in things like reliefs and appeals and things like that, but we should have a better warning of those things coming down the line going forward.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from Cabinet members? Councillor Davis. Thank you.
I hope you can hear me. It's in respect of how brilliant the finance team has been in regards to not having a full complement of staff and doing the what seems to be quite a difficult transition to Unit 4. So for me the question is, do you feel more confident in yourselves now as a team, and have we gone through the bedding in period of Unit 4?
I think that one's going to come across to officers to answer.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we feel much more confident with where we're at with Unit 4 now, especially going through the statement of accounts preparation as well, and all the mapping work that we've been doing in order to make that process a lot easier. We have recently had a few more members of staff join the team as well on a permanent basis. We don't have any interims anymore, which is fantastic. So we're really kind of embedding that culture within the team as well. So it's really good.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? If not, any questions from Councillor Scarf, Councillor Caston? None? Okay, in that case, I can open up this item for debate. Who'd like to make a contribution to the debate? Councillor Winch.
Yeah, I'm not going to say much, but just a few words. So obviously it's a very good result. £4.6 million surplus is pretty good, and it's a good result against budget. And I think the report is very comprehensive. So most of the questions that you might think of are detailed in the body of the report. And actually, apart from business rates, the swings and roundabouts, but it's pretty much on budget. In terms of the capital programme, we actually had a really ambitious capital programme of 36 million, and we've managed 23 million. I'm not too worried about the capital programme here because most of the things have just shifted over year end, like Shelf, Stowmarket Innovation Gateway, recycling. A lot of things are actually going well, but they've just shifted over the year end. Another really good thing about the result is we haven't done any additional borrowing, so it shows that the council's in a really strong financial position. It's creating strong surpluses, and we're able to have a really strong capital programme. So again, thanks to officers for all their work on this.
Thank you. Anyone else like to contribute? Okay, if not, we will move to the vote. Now, there's a whole page of recommendations here. I don't intend to read those out because I think Councillor Pearson covered them very adequately in her introduction to the report. But this recommendation is 3.1 down to 3.7. I will now ask the Governance Officer to conduct the vote.
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now in progress. Thank you, Chair. That is 7 votes for. That's unanimous.
Great, thank you very much, and thank you to all the officers who worked on those two reports. So we now move on to item 10. This is paper MCA/26/4, the Quarter 4 25-26 Mid-Suffolk Performance Report. And we've got officers here to support this item: Sarah Wilcock, Director for Corporate Services, Joe Hobbs, Head of Strategic Policy, and Claire Reid, Performance and Improvement Strategic Lead. But it's down to me to introduce this report as Cabinet Member for Performance and Resilience. So this quarterly performance report provides an overview of performance for the period for Jan to March this year. So this is Quarter 4 of the last municipal year. And the performance measures here are aligned to the priorities set out in the Mid-Suffolk Plan. Also attached to this is the Council Housing Assurance Report for the same period as an appendix, and this focuses on the performance of our housing service as landlord of over 3,400 council homes, and includes the tenant satisfaction measures, and I'll ask Councillor Winch to say a few words about that shortly. Generally, the indicators for the period remain stable, but just to point out a few highlights from the report. On planning, applications were performing well with very few overturns and lots of the decisions being made on time. We have now 31 neighbourhood plans complete or in progress in Mid-Suffolk, with Fressingfield and Stradbroke plan reviews commencing during this period. The curbside collection of waste collection rates remain very good at 99.91% during that quarter. We've seen a small increase in both the number of business waste subscribers and garden waste subscribers from this time last year. Obviously, the figures for recycling, which are on page 14 of the report, relate to a period before the changes in waste regime that took place last week. So we can expect to see big changes in the reporting in this area when we see the Quarter 1 and particularly the Quarter 2 reports later in the year. We've had a big increase in the number of visitors to the Stowmarket and I customer access points. This 948 visitors to Stowmarket, which is the biggest quarter so far. And the number of daily visits to the Mid-Suffolk website for Quarter 4 was 3,439, so that's a big increase, 46% up on this time last year. Just to balance out the positives, there was an increase in demand on our call centres, along with several retirements in the customer service team, and this did have a negative impact on our call waiting times and our calls abandoned figures, and you can see that in page 17 of the report. We have recruited to replace those, and in actual fact, across the period, the customer satisfaction has remained high at around 85%. In housing, our void repair times and average relet times are both above target and therefore showing red in the report. This is partly as a result of focusing on getting repairs fully completed before new tenants move in. So we've ended up with an increased tenant satisfaction measure, but obviously the time taken to relet properties has increased. So those are a few highlights from this. I'll now ask Councillor Winch to say a few words about the housing insurance report.
Yeah, so what I thought I'd do is, I'm not going to obviously read out the figures because you've got those in front of you. I just wanted to go through some of the highlights and some of the issues. I think the report indicates there's a considerable lag from when we actually take measures or when we make improvements to actually seeing them in the numbers. And I think some of the work that we've been doing is now showing in the numbers. And repairs are a case in point, where there are a lot of actions that were done around reorganisation and new systems, and we kept looking at the numbers and saying, well, where's the improvement? But now we're really seeing that come through. And some of the changes in, like, for example, repairs completed on time, if you compare that with a year ago, is a phenomenal improvement. Our rent collection remains good in the high 90s. Our compliance figures are generally very good, either 100% or 99% plus. We've got some red areas around damp and mould. And when I get the report, of course, like most people, you skim through and find the red areas where you've got problems. So our percentage of damp and mould inspections completed within 10 working days is 87.1%, and our percentage of emergency hazards resolved within 24 hours is 75%, and this is really around no access issues, and it's something that the team are looking at the moment. The other area that's red is around stock condition, decent homes. The good thing is by the end of August we'll have completed all our stock condition surveys, but it's the work that we've done on that's made it visible, the problem that we actually had, where we were working on a false basis before. We've got just over 12.65% of homes not meeting decent standards at the end of the year, but we're on track to get that down to 4.9% or under 5% by the end of the year. Our tenant perception scores, these are really, really important because we can have all the internal stats in the world. It's how the tenant is perceiving our service. It's really, really important to us. And if you look at all of those, I'll just pick out a couple. Overall satisfaction with the service provider has improved 6% this year and is up to 74%. Satisfaction the landlord provides a home that's well maintained is up 6% to 76%. Satisfaction that we provide a home that's safe has gone up 7% to 83%. So real good improvement on a lot of those tenant satisfaction measures. One that always stands out is our satisfaction with complaints, which has improved significantly, up by 20% from a year ago, but from a very low base, and is now at 48%. If you actually look at our objective stats in here around Stage 1 and Stage 2 complaints responded to within timescales, our numbers are quite good. So we've got this issue around what we're treating as a formal complaint versus what a tenant perceives as a complaint or an issue. In terms of voids, we've got one red item here, which is our move-in stats, the satisfaction with the condition of the property on move-in. But again, that has improved significantly in the year from 52% to 73%. Something that, and this is an example of a lagging stat, I think that's going to carry on improving, and it's been an area of focus over the last year. ASB satisfaction has increased. An interesting area of the report is the transactional repairs data. So this is the texting after every repair. How did we do? And those stats are looking really good, all above 90%. So the conclusion, I think, this report it is a little bit of trepidation when you look at this report because it sort of opens the kimono and it does give a real window on our service. I think that members will be able to see that we are making great strides in a lot of places, and where we have problems, that is now visible, and there are plans behind the scenes to do stuff about that. The thing I really like about it is it gives a platform for us all to work on the same basis. So our tenant boards, our tenants, officers, members, we've all got the same interests here, and we've got the stats in front of us, so we can all work together. And I'd really just like to take this opportunity to thank all the staff, a lot of them who are here today, for all the improvements that have happened over the last 12 months. And I know there's a huge amount of work that's gone in over the last few years to get us here. We're not there, it's a journey, but we are making a lot of improvements.
Thank you. I should have said earlier that I'm happy to propose the recommendation on this paper. Councillor Winch, are you happy to second? Yeah. Thank you. Any questions from Cabinet members on the performance report and the housing assurance report? Councillor Davis and then Councillor Penny.
I've got 3 questions, so I don't know if...
Yep. Let's have them all and we'll see what we can do with them, yeah.
Okay, so the first question is in respect to our performance report, and I've noticed that our staff sickness is higher than it was last year cumulatively, and it's higher than the national employer reported average. So I'm wondering, are we looking at that? Is there sort of an anomaly in respect to that? And basically, are we ensuring that we're looking after our staff, especially with regards to the potential, the upheaval of LGR?
You're illustrating very well what a nightmare this report is, because you can ask anything about the housing service. I don't know the answer to that. Is that anything that we're probably going to have to take that one away, I would guess?
I have a regular meeting with the head of HR and OD. These figures are discussed on a regular basis, and yeah, there is very close monitoring on this and analysis of some of the reasons behind that. There are individual cases which sometimes make the figures look a bit odd, but I don't think it's appropriate to go into those right now. But I can certainly give you a sort of briefing on that based on the information that I've got from the HROD briefings. Yeah. Unless do you want to add anything to that? No? Okay. Yeah, second question, Councillor Davis.
Okay, and this may be directed more to officers in regards to our assurance report. Have we inspected, or do we actively inspect all properties for damp and mould, or is it more reactive?
So it is more of a reactive service at the minute for a large proportion, but we have got, from doing our stock condition surveys, from all of our contractors, particularly the heating contractors, because they're in every property every year, will report back if they notice any damp and mould. I know the repairs team actively report back, so we are being proactive, but I think actually if you look at the detail, actually still a large proportion of those cases that come in, us are still working on a reactive basis. So we are being more proactive on it.
Yeah, Councillor Davis.
Also, we were given a figure of 12.65% in respect of some of our homes falling below the decent home standard. And I know we haven't done a full stock check yet, but what are the main issues that are bringing them below this standard?
So, just for reassurance, that figure's actually now about 90% decent. So it's actually for Mid Suffolk, we're about 10% non-decent now. The main issues are around thermal comfort. And again, thermal comfort covers particularly insulation, loft insulation and cavity wall insulation, but it also covers commentary on our heating systems, whether or not, depending if it's high efficiency or low efficiency heating, whether there's programs in place. So we are at the minute, we've identified some issues where actually there are programs in place, so we're validating that data, installing programs where we have found that there aren't programs where there should be, and one of the other issues that came up, a very small proportion, was where stock condition surveyors had deemed that there was insufficient heating in the property. So we're actively, even though we've carried out heat calculations to say actually the heating is sufficient, we are now putting in, particularly with in the electrical system, storage radiators in additional rooms for residents. So we are doing a lot of work on that. But that's the main area. We do have some roofing issues. They're on programme as well, but the main area is thermal comfort.
Can I just ask a supplementary on that one? Does the 10% non-decent that we've got at the moment, does that relate to any particular housing type or age of property? Is there any way we can sort of narrow it down?
So I can get that detail for you and report back. The caveat I would add to that is we're aware that 10% is based on the 81% of surveys that are completed. Once we finish this next round of stock condition surveys, ideally the number will come down, but we may see that number fluctuate.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Penny had a question, and then Councillor Overett.
Just a very general question on the performance report. The figures for collection of council tax and business rates is extremely high. I was just wondering, because I'm quite surprised that there don't seem to be any effects due to the cost of living crisis. How do this year's figures relate to previous years, or with our funds to help those, are we managing the cost of living crisis? Do you think?
Okay, so I think there's a couple of things there. One is, obviously we have a council tax reduction scheme, which is targeted at those in most need, obviously quite effective. I'm not sure what the comparison is with previous years. I wonder if officers, I'm looking along the line to see who might want to comment on that. Director of Finance and Procurement.
Yeah, I don't have those figures off the top of my head, but we can certainly get those and share them with you. From memory, I don't think they are that dissimilar. We always end the year on a fairly similar position in terms of collection, so I think we're probably fairly similar, but I'll confirm that. That's all.
Thank you. Councillor Overett, you had a question.
Thank you. Yeah, my question also relates about the decent home standard. The figures across the 3 quarters don't seem to have a consistent pattern. For example, Q2 to Q3 shows a greater percentage drop than the other quarters. Given this lack of a consistent pattern, how confident can we be in the current forecast of a further reduction of more than 7% by the end of 26-27, and what's the anticipated timescale for reaching the target of 1%? Thanks.
Okay.
So, yeah, the question around the consistency is a valid one, because that's really where we've been going out, and obviously not all of the work streams take the same amount of time. Obviously replacing a roof isn't takes much longer than replacing programs on a heating system. So it's really just that trajectory of it coming down is just about how quickly the work's getting done, to be honest. In terms of the projections we've got, so we have onboarded a new insulation contractor. Prior to that, we didn't have a dedicated insulation contractor before. Their programme of works is focused at the front end entirely on our decent homes failings, and we're working to get those all corrected. We are in the process as well of reappointing a new roofing contractor. That tender's just about to go out. We did tender and award a roofing contract this time last year, but unfortunately that was a company called Breyer Group that had passed all checks and then within 2 months liquidated as a whole, so we had to then re-go out to tender, but unfortunately by then new procurement rules had come in, so we had to almost start the whole process from scratch again. So I'm confident on reaching that target. At the moment I've got a projection of 2% non-decent by April 27. The 2% will be based around structural issues that will need to be monitored for a period of time for insurance reasons, etc. Obviously, if there was any structural issues that were major concerns or health and safety issues, we would just get on with the works and make them safe, but we just as that's part of the process.
Okay. Councillor Pearson.
Thank you, Chair. Could I ask about the Council Housing Assurance Report? There's a lot of data in there that's showing 100% achievement. Is that data, where does that data come from? Is it all in-house data, or is there external data included, external review?
I can answer that one again. So the report is all in-house data, but for a lot of especially our compliance areas, we have external third-party auditors. So we have a company called GCS, for example, that carry out 10% external audits across gas and electrics. If they find any issues, that's then escalated back to the contractor, and that report that they provide us details even down to the engineer that has carried out the work. So if we see patterns of a specific engineer that's not doing the job properly, we have had instances where we've removed engineers from the contract and we won't let them carry on. If we find issues as well, at standard we work on a 10% sample rate. If we do find issues, we extend that sample rate to 20, 30% until we see that the issues are dropping again, or we're not seeing them, and then we'll bring it back down in line with policy.
Okay, thank you.
That gives us the assurance on the in-house data.
Councillor Weller, you've got a question.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I couldn't immediately see it in here, and it could be because it's not reported here. But if we were supporting a tenant to secure their home from flooding, for example, Is that something that would be reflected in any of the data on this report?
Sorry, I can go ahead. So in terms of flood, so we do a lot of work with residents. We don't report on it as in the council house, the assurance report. That is potentially something we could look at adding if you wanted to see it. We have been working with the Environment Agency, especially in the flood risk areas, and then we have been working with residents that aren't in flood risk areas that do experience some flooding issues.
I think Councillor Davis and myself would really appreciate it if we could get some data on that. Whether it's reported here or not, it may not be appropriate, but I think because it is an issue in the district, a number of residents of our tenants, suffer flooding, including recently when we don't need a storm event situation for people to suffer from flooding, and I think it'd be good if we could show what what's the standard of our remedial action and how timely is it, for example. But again, it may not be relevant for this report, but I think because it's an ongoing thing, it maybe could be relevant for this report. But I'll leave it for you to determine.
We've got a new Director of Housing. I should have introduced you, Kerry, but you want to come in on this point.
Yeah, hi everybody, I'm Kerry Theobald. This is day 6, so forgive my newbie comments. But I think the key thing is there are a number of risks that affect our tenants across the district. Flooding is one of them, radon, there are a number of others. All of those I think we need to establish as part of our asset management strategy, not only how many it affects, but also what our strategy is for dealing with those. That strategy will be coming through towards the back end of the summer. So I think if we can incorporate flooding as one of those in that document, we'll bring through not only the effect, but what we're going to do about it as part of that strategy.
Thank you. Any other questions from Cabinet members? If not, Councillor Scarf, Councillor Caston. Councillor Scarf, you've got on.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Well, as Councillor Winch said, we always focus on the red items, don't we, on these reports, and that's where I'm going to focus on. The two are inextricably linked. One of them is the void repair time in calendar days, and the other is the average relet time. Now, we started a new voids process on the 1st of April, which prioritises compliance issues before we hand them over to the voids contractor. The two figures at the moment, the current target for both, we're quite a way off those figures, having had some fairly stable figures in the previous quarters. Are we confident that this new process will actually improve those figures over the next quarter and going beyond? And I do appreciate, obviously, the tenant satisfaction measures are improving because of the work that we're doing with the housing before we hand them over. But there's always a negative factor when voids are long. It's a loss of income to the housing revenue account, so I suppose you have to offset that against that. So I suppose my question is, are we confident that we will reach our targets over the next few quarters or not?
We'll pass this over, but this is obviously a dilemma, and it was something that we've discussed with the tenant board, in that we had a lot of voids which weren't in that great a condition, and a decision was made to inspect them all and slow the process down, because we needed to get on top of this problem before we looked at the void turnaround times. But everyone is very aware of the void turnaround times. Jane, do you want to comment?
Yeah, I mean, as we said, we've now got a new contractor on board for Mid-Suffolk. And we're bringing in the compliance part of the the compliance have it for about 2 weeks to do all the compliance stuff. Because what was happening previously is we were going in, we were doing the old way, doing the old lettable standards, and then handing that back. But there was also a lot of stuff, rewires needed to be done, there were other bits and pieces that needed to be done. And that was always in the past, we can do that work when somebody's moved in. But that was a bit disruptive. We were getting a lot of complaints and a lot of comments back from the tenants. So that's why we slowed everything down. We said, right, what we need to do is we need to get compliance in there first. There's a lot of asbestos that needs to be removed, rewires, that can be done. And then they do all of that. We then go in and do the rest, which should speed everything up. The contractor we've got is obviously on the implementation phase at the moment, and they are picking up some backlog that we had before. The other thing that we found is that for some reason, not quite sure why, but Mid Suffolk has got a huge amount of voids that are coming in all the time. There were a lot more than what we anticipated. And initially, we only had the one contractor that was doing all voids across Mid Suffolk and Baber, and that caused us issues. But now we've got another contractor in place that's split. And the contractor that works in Baber can also cross over. So if we do find that there's any backlog, we've got that backup now with two contractors. But I see as we move forward, of course, it's going to make, we're doing a lot of the compliance stuff, and we're putting new bathrooms and kitchens in. That helps the decency as well, because eventually you're going to get, voids, we can get in there and we can do all of that stuff. So that also helps Richard's team for their planned programme and brings things forward. So yeah, as we're working with the contractors and we have regular meetings with them, we've got surveyors that are going out doing pre and post inspections, and we're getting it turned around hopefully a lot quicker. Within the next quarter you should start to see those figures improve, and hopefully the satisfaction level should go up. So we're now repainting and redecorating all voids, so that when you're going in, everything's painted white, you've got a blank canvas, and the new tenant's got something to start with. Whereas previously the lettable standard was you just gave a paint pack, and that also created issues. People were peeling off wallpaper off the wall, and then plaster was coming off, and it was all sorts of stuff. So yeah, it's a bit of a journey that we've been on, but everything that we're doing is to improve the stock and the experience of the tenant when they move in.
Any further questions? No? We're all done. So I can now open this item up for debate. If anyone would like to debate this item. Councillor Weller.
Thank you, Chair. We do normally look at the reds, don't we? But I want to look at one of the greens here, and for, apropos of nothing, just to mention on page 14, the curbside refuse collection success rate. We've set ourselves a very ambitious target of 99.94%, and it's great that we've either exceeded in this, this reporting period, we've either exceeded it or come within sort of 0.03% of that very ambitious rate. So, like I say, apropos of absolutely nothing, I think it's really good to reflect on the fact that we've had a really good, successful delivery rate during that year, and I think that's thanks to Director of Ops and everybody in the refuse and recycling team. Just wanted to put that on the record. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Stringer.
Yeah, thank you. It's always interesting when you get a report like this. It's almost a blunderbuss of statistics and things going in different directions and all that. It's really difficult to sort of separate the music from the noise. But I have to say, I want to congratulate the team on how well this document's laid out. It makes it really easy to follow and get a bit of a snapshot of what's going on. And when I think back to what some of the issues that we've done a significant amount of work on, this demonstrates there's been a real load of good work going on in the last few years to really turn some of this stuff around. When I think about the backlog we had in terms of housing repairs and where that service was a few years ago to where it is now, where it's getting really close to being able to hit that customer satisfaction target, I think that's a remarkable achievement. And I want to put my thanks on record for even that one item. But that doesn't mean also that you can be at all complacent. It seems we've turned the tank around, and it's going in a really, really interesting direction. But we need to be focused on a lot of areas to make sure we don't fall off the tightrope we've set ourselves. But like I say, I just want to express that thanks and thank the way the document is laid out. But it does show that we're getting really close to allowing as many people to thrive in Mid Suffolk as possible, and I think that's what I take the music from the noise that's in this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stringer. Anyone else? Okay. If not, then I'll just read out the recommendation, which is simply 3.1, to note the performance for quarter 4 for 25-26, including the key performance indicators which are shown in red in the status and the commentary around those. And thank you to the officers who helped prepare these reports, and I now ask the governance officers to conduct the vote.
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now in progress. Thank you, Chair. That's 7 votes for, that's unanimous.
Thank you very much. So we'll move on to item 11. This is paper MCA/26/5, the annual climate report and annual update of greenhouse gas emissions. And we have officers here, Tom Barker, Chief Operating Officer to my right, Jonathan Ward, Head of Climate and Nature Recovery, and Sarah Wilding, Climate Change Manager, here to support this item. But I'll now invite the Cabinet Member for Environment, Culture and Wellbeing to introduce the report. Councillor Weller.
Thank you, Chair. The annual climate report outlines Mid Suffolk District Council's progress in delivering its climate and sustainability commitments, marking a shift from planning to implementation. Key achievements include investment in energy efficiency and solar projects through SIL funding, with around £110,000 approved and spent, improved management of council energy use, and expansion of low carbon infrastructure such as EV charging and renewable energy. The Council strengthened community and business support through initiatives like Solar for Business, youth engagement and green skills programmes, and continued funding for home energy improvements via Cosy Homes. A new district-wide retrofit and energy advice programme, REACH, was also approved. Additional progress includes promoting sustainable transport, embedding climate considerations into governance and operations, and building internal capacity through leadership, staff engagement and improved processes. Overall, the report demonstrates clear progress towards the Council's climate emergency goals and its target of net zero emissions by 2030, whilst laying foundations for further action. Turning to the greenhouse gas report, in 2024-25, emissions were 1,116 metric tonnes of carbon dioxide equivalent, which is around 40% lower than the baseline of 3,026 metric tonnes of carbon. And improved data accuracy both increased emissions by including previously uncounted utilities such as temporary accommodation, and reduced them through better meter readings and corrected billing. So year-to-year fluctuations are expected due to factors like weather, occupancy and equipment performance, but the overall downward trend remains the key focus. An increase in gas usage at the Staymarket Leisure Centre may be due to colder weather or cooler weather for longer periods, data inconsistencies or operational factors such as heating systems and controls, although this remains uncertain and further work's required to really get to the bottom of what's happening at the leisure centre. Solar panels across the council sites generated 109 megawatts of electricity, megawatt hours rather, of electricity, avoiding 61 metric tonnes of carbon dioxide equivalent emissions. Meanwhile, increased electricity use from EV charging points is seen positively, reflecting greater electric vehicle use and saving an estimated 5.7 metric tonnes of carbon dioxide equivalent compared to petrol and diesel. The report has no immediate financial implications. However, delivering decarbonisation will require significant council investment, likely amounting to several £1 million. Officers are working to improve cost accuracy for key interventions and will provide more detailed reports following further analysis and expert advice. Given that each property varies in construction, systems and maintenance history, using generic cost estimates would be inappropriate, and business cases will differ depending on the type of intervention. In addition to upfront capital costs, many emission reduction measures can influence finances by lowering energy demand or generating income, such as through solar energy export. Officers have started gathering this financial performance data from current projects and will incorporate it into future initiatives to support informed decision making. While the Council will continue to seek external funding, projects often still require match funding, internal project management, and sufficient resources and expertise to operate, manage and maintain assets. I draw Cabinet's attention to an example of related spend at 8.5 in the paper, where a grant of 17, just short of £18,000 from the Heat Network Efficiency Scheme will fund an optimisation study at St Peter's Court, which is one of our 20 flat schemes in Claydon, to better understand the requirements of decarbonisation. The findings will inform modelling for other sheltered housing schemes and support future bids for capital funding through match fund, although match funding will be required. So I'd like to thank Sarah Warding, Jonathan Ward, Ian Farquharson and Beth Murrell and Tom Baker for many hours of analysis, comprehensive drafting and presentation of these excellent reports. So I commend the reports to Cabinet and I'm happy to move the recommendation to note it.
Thank you, Councillor Weller, and I'm happy to second the recommendation. Any questions from Cabinet members on this report? Councillor Winch.
Can I ask about home working? Because this has come up before and I still can't quite get my mind around it. So if I look at the table, 9% of emissions, I'm just looking at the council now, council emissions are from home working. And it seems like in terms of the methodology, we penalise ourselves for more home working. Have I misunderstood that? And how does that calculation work? So if we had nobody home working, would our emissions go the opposite way from what most people would think?
Thanks, Chair. It's a good question, and I think we had discussed this previously at overview and scrutiny. So there is a standard government sort of calculation in the conversion factors they give us each year for calculating reports. So it goes in our Scope 3 emissions, whereas if we'd had the people in the building, it goes in our sort of Scope 1 and 2, so the emissions that we directly control by burning or using energy for electricity. And it makes a series of assumptions, which will be too high in impact for some of people in our workforce, too low for others. But it generally assumes overall that there is a mixture of trade-offs between how much energy you're using at home and maybe needing the whole heating on at home versus a small part of an office, but also changes in travel emissions. So it is a standardised factor rather than anything that's custom to potentially long distances saved for our own workforce. So it is very much an approximation. We're relying on a sort of standard metric here. So it does mean that in some ways you can be penalised if the factor is higher than it would have been for people using the office. But then you also have to kind of counter that with incorporating their travel emissions as well. So it's very much dependent on how far people are travelling and also what times of year they are present in the office. So at the moment this is a very simple calculation rather than perhaps a complete reflection of what the emissions are.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, any questions from Councillor Scarth, Councillor Caston on this report? No? If not, then we can open this item up for debate. Who'd like to contribute to the debate? Councillor Winch, thank you.
Yeah, so I really like the way this report has brought the two things together. So half of the report is about what we're doing in the district and half the report is what we're actually doing as a council. And I think that's really made it visible, everything that's going on, whereas before we just had the greenhouse gas report. When you look at the annual climate report, there's a huge amount that we are doing as a council, and Councillor Weller has named some of the main areas, but even things like reading about the new thing we had with Solar for Business, where there's 250 panels put on a business and the iTrading estate, and that's going to save them 10 grand a year. So it's really good work that's going on. The greenhouse gas report illustrates some of the challenges that we have in reducing our emissions even further, because if I look at the biggest areas, the sheltered housing 34%, leisure centres 32%, they are really tricky areas to actually improve our emissions, and it's something about you know, what is our strategy for those areas as well, and what's the best use of money. But I do think that this report sort of, because it's got everything in it, it allows us to think, if we're going to spend money, where is the most effective place to put that? So thanks very much for putting this together. It's a really useful report.
Councillor Weller, thank you.
Just an observation, because it's really, it was just serendipitous that the two things came together, that we could report on them at the same time this time. And I was just going to make well, it's too late for questions, so I'm not going to make this into a question, but maybe is a suggestion allowed at this point? That maybe in future we do the same thing again, that we try to align them to bring the two things together, if not in the same report, at least at the same time in this way. I think it's quite a useful way for Cabinet and the public to see all the information, related information together. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else? Well, just a few comments from me then. I think paragraph 4.6 is pretty helpful on page 114. This is in the overview, not the actual report, but it talks about the fact that certain decarbonisation interventions are linked to the longer term decisions on the usable lifespan of our assets. So, for example, the leisure centre, which is a huge draw on our, or a huge part of the carbon that we produce, 32%, and yet we have an asset which is ageing, and it would be difficult to make major changes to reduce that without thinking about the long-term viability of that building as well. So that's one of the kind of areas we have to sort of grapple with, or our successor council will have to grapple with in the future, in terms of trying to drive down emissions and yet looking at the long-term future of that asset. I think it's also important to say that whilst we have committed to reduce our own emissions as a council down to zero by 2030, it's important that we look at the wider emissions from everyone in the district. And I think it's really important, if net zero is what we want to try and achieve, and that is what the Climate Change Committee is saying is the only game in town in terms of making a difference to climate, that we all need to be aligned. We need to be aligned from central government giving the right messages, the county council, the district council, parish councils and individual households as well, making the right decisions. And that's where we can get the biggest impact, if we're all aligned and heading in the same direction. And we're certainly doing our part as a council, as a district council, and we look to others to do their part as well. Any other contributions to the debate? Councillor Stringer, thank you.
Yeah, just very quickly, you know, when there's talk of councils perhaps undeclaring and not focusing on some of this work, it's remarkable if you just look at the table on page 126. I did have a bit of a sharp intake of breath because I confused the two blue colours and suddenly thought, God, if our waste fleet is 34%, now we've doubled the amount of collections, that's going to just spiral. It isn't, it's the 6%. But even so, that could well grow significantly in the next reporting cycle. But what it does do is show up the potential of the issues that we need to address and the challenges that we have. So if we know that 34% of our largest emissions are from sheltered housing, then we need to know where that focus can go in on how you do it. I'm not suggesting it's easy, but it just shows the areas that you need to work on first, and what those kind of issues will throw up and where that investment is needed. So even if you didn't declare an emergency, the mere fact of just doing this work is really valuable to know where the investment needs to be to make you more efficient in carbon terms and also energy efficiency terms. So actually this is very good for showing you how you can make cost savings. So actually I think the work that we do, it seems incredibly technical in nature and sometimes throws up some things that we think, well, that seems a bit rum in Suffolk speak. It's actually a really valuable tool for knowing where to steer investment and also to highlight those challenges we need to face. Thank you.
Thank you. If no further contributions to the debate, then I'll just read out the recommendation. 3.1, that the contents of the annual climate report for 2025 and the greenhouse gas emissions report 24-25 at Appendix A of this report be noted by Cabinet prior to publication on the Council's website. And can I thank the officers for their work on this item? And I'll now ask the Governance Officer to conduct the vote.
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now in progress. Thank you, Chair. That is 7 votes for. That's unanimous.
Thank you. So we'll now come out to 11 o'clock. We've still got 3 items on the agenda, so I'm going to suggest that we take a short break, and that may give officers an opportunity to depart if their part in the meeting is finished. So we'll suspend the meeting for 10 minutes. Okay, welcome back. Thank you for coming back, and we'll move on to the rest of the items on the agenda. So, we now have item 12, which is paper MCA/26/6, the Building Safety Regulator Inspection, the letter of outcome. And we've got Mark Ems, Paul Hughes and James Buckingham here to support this item. So I'll now invite the Cabinet Member for Environment, Culture and Wellbeing to introduce the report. Councillor Weller.
Thank you, Chair. The Building Safety Regulator's role includes oversight of all building control organisations and registered building inspectors in both the public and private sectors. The BSR inspects all building control bodies every 4 years to assess compliance with the operational standard rules, and if non-compliance is identified and not adequately addressed, the BSR can take enforcement action, including issuing improvement notices or serious contravention notices under the amended Building Act 1984. Our inspection took place between October 25 and February 26, and it involved 4 online meetings, each lasting 2 to 3 hours, during which evidence was reviewed against the OSR standards. The BSR inspection provided independent assurance of the Council's building control arrangements and found that the service is generally operating in accordance with the operational standard rules. Out of 30 standards assessed, only 5 areas of non-compliance were identified, and these were in the areas of systems and controls, building control functions, and enforcement and intervention. The building control teams developed an action plan, which is set out in Appendix C, with the aim of achieving compliance within the deadline of 31st of July next month, and the team's competent and assuring that it's more than able to fulfil those obligations and return an action plan that the regulator will be happy with. Thank you.
Okay, can we have a seconder? Councillor Davis, thank you. Any questions from Cabinet members on this? Councillor Winch.
2 very quick questions. So a typical member of the public might be a little bit alarmed that we weren't compliant. Would they be right in being alarmed? And the other question is, I think when we had a briefing on this, we were confident that all areas of non-compliance would be resolved by the end of July. Is that still the case?
I mean, that's correct. The areas of non-compliance, as I understand, although I'll ask Paul to come in with small detail if you want it, they're not significant non-compliances. So in that respect, they're relatively easy to remedy. But I mean, if you want something a bit more detailed from Paul on that.
Good morning. There's no issues as far as resourcing, as far as quality management system. In terms, there were no issues in terms of governance and operational effectiveness, other than the items which they've picked up. So it's unfortunate in the way that the BSR conduct the inspection, in that it's not a means to offer a rating. They're just pointing out areas where you need to improve. So I am confident that we've got everything in place. In comparison to other neighbouring local authorities that have gone through this process, we've come out of it fairly well. The improvement letter is the least it's the first rung of enforcement which the BSR have. So in that sense, it's not that bad. And in terms of the time scale in which to implement the improvements that they've asked for, they're all on track to be implemented by the 31st of July.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions? Any questions from Councillor Scarr?
Yes, thank you, Chair. the opposition groups had a briefing on this and all the subject that we've discussed today the other day, and one of the things that came out was, which I thought was really rather perverse from a scrutiny point of view, is that the building safety regulator doesn't publish all of the reports. They just give you the information on your specific council or private enterprise, and I thought that was rather perverse, because I don't see how, if you can't access the report, how do you know? So the question would be, I'm presuming that we're going to publish this report within our own website, which I would welcome. But would the council consider, because I think it's actually necessary, writing to the government and actually asking them to improve the system? I know it's a new body which has just come into place within the last 3 or 4 years, but by improving the system to make it more visible, so that other authorities other than hearsay and other building safety regulating practices could share the information, because I think it's rather perverse. I mean, we don't get a rating overall, we just get a letter which tells us where we're wanting. So it doesn't give you an overall, in my opinion, an overall view like an Ofsted or something like that would do. I wonder whether that might be something we'd consider.
Councillor Weller.
Thanks, Councillor Scarf, for that question. It's an interesting one. Having worked for regulators in different sectors myself, when they are new, they do tend not to publish their findings to start with. So it might be timely to come back to them to say, now that you've sort of developed a bit of a methodology and maybe tested your own standards and the way that you assess them, I'm quite happy to write to the relevant authority and say, how about publishing that information, putting it in the public domain, putting those ratings out there, so that there's a bit of a comparator available to the public. I'm quite happy to take that as an action.
Thank you, Councillor Weller. Any other questions? No? So I can now open this item up for debate, if anyone would like to debate it. If not, then I'll just read out the recommendations. 3.1, that Cabinet notes the 5 areas of non-compliance identified through the BSR audit and the internal action plan in place to address these by July. And 3.2, that Cabinet acknowledges the service-wide scope of the audit, notes that the number of non-compliances identified was limited, and further notes that the audit provides independent assurance regarding the Council's current arrangements. And I'll now ask the Government Officer to conduct the vote.
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now in progress. Thank you, Chair. That is 7 votes for. That's unanimous.
Thank you very much, and thank you to the officers for attending and supporting that item. We move on to item 13. This is paper MCA/26/7, the Baber and Mid Suffolk District Council's Joint Air Quality Strategy, April 2026. And we have Tom Barker as Chief Operating Officer to support this item, and James Buckingham. Sorry, I introduced you with the previous item, but you're here for this one. I'll now invite the Cabinet Member for Environment, Culture and Wellbeing to introduce the report. Councillor Weller.
Thank you, Chair. Under the Environment Act 1985, local authorities have an obligation to manage air quality in their areas. The particular strategy required depends on the pollution levels in the area. The good news, unsurprisingly, is that in general terms, Mid Suffolk doesn't have high levels of air pollution. Were the same to be said for the condition of our waterways. Because we don't meet the high air pollution threshold requiring an air quality action plan, the guidance indicates that we should instead have an air quality strategy. So that's what this is. It's focused on prevention of pollution rather than reacting to breaches. So this strategy addresses maintaining air quality standards, reducing exposure to pollution, and improving public health. The strategy builds on existing policies and supports the Council's delivery plan by promoting sustainable, low-emission transport, encouraging behaviour change, and reducing inequalities linked to poor air quality. It also contributes to wider environmental and net zero goals, fosters healthier and more resilient communities, and emphasises collaborative working with regional partners. The strategy identifies 4 key priorities. Transport emissions are a key source of air pollution in the district, particularly from cars and light good vehicles, and can be reduced by promoting active travel, cleaner vehicles and improved public transport. The Council is expanding its electric vehicle charging infrastructure, supporting car clubs and encouraging walking and cycling to cut emissions and support net zero goals. We're also working with regional transport partners to improve bus and rail services. Internally, staff are encouraged to use sustainable travel options through incentives such as cycle schemes, discounted public transport, car sharing and electric vehicle leasing. The second policy area is on policy and guidance. A range of existing policies and strategies at local, regional and national levels influence transport emissions in Mid-Suffolk. The LC Whip identifies and prioritises improvements to walking and cycling infrastructure, supports integration with planning and transport policy, and helps secure funding. It's regularly reviewed and updated. On public information campaigns, the Council is committed to raising public awareness of air quality through initiatives such as the Clean Air Day campaign, which highlights health impacts and promotes positive behaviour change. Activities have included social media campaigns, community events, and anti-idling initiatives at schools demonstrating effective partnership working. Residents will also be supported in the near future, through the REACH programme, which provides free advice on home energy improvements, low carbon heating and ventilation to ensure good indoor air quality. The scheme helps reduce emissions, improve health and comfort, particularly for those at risk of fuel poverty, and encourages long-term behaviour change in line with national standards and wider climate initiatives. And finally, air quality monitoring. From January 26, Mid-Suffolk's operated 5 passive diffusion tube monitors. These monitor nitrogen dioxide, ozone and sulphur dioxide to assess roadside air pollution and track the impact of transport-related policies. The Council plans to expand this monitoring network to provide more comprehensive data and increase public transparency and confidence in local air quality. Although much of the report is highly technical, so please don't ask me any questions in relation to section 2 or all the stuff at the end, it is confirming our district's positive status regarding air pollution, and the non-algebraic parts make for interesting reading. I'd like to thank James Buckingham and colleagues for providing support to our consultants in commissioning the report, and I'm happy to commend it to Cabinet.
Thank you, Councillor Weller. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Davis, thank you very much. Any questions on this item? Councillor Winch, thank you.
It's just for my understanding, really. We don't operate any automatic monitoring sites. Is that because it's not relevant to do so, it's too expensive, or we don't have a need? Why don't we do that?
Councillor Weller, go ahead. Yeah.
That is correct. It's because we don't meet the threshold. So there is a threshold. We don't meet the threshold, so we don't need to. There was one in Baber, in Sudbury for a while, but that was removed because the situation became better due to the interventions that were put in place. So it then no longer met the threshold either. But we don't have one in Mid-Suffolk for that reason. But of course we do have the passive monitoring. So that's happening. So if that picked up thresholds which required us to put that status in place, then that's what we'd do.
Does the passive monitoring, does that require human resource to do that, or no?
It does to put it up. It's a little tube which is open at one end and shut at the other, and it's got a little bit of material inside with a chemical. It just sits on a lamppost basically. So there is human resource required to stick it up there. There is human resource required to go and collect it again afterwards and analyse the data that it attracts from the materials that it absorbs, the particulates that it absorbs. But other than that, and some analysis, which is relatively low cost compared with more mechanical means of testing air, is very, very low cost.
Any further questions? Councillor Penny.
Just with further expansion of industrial areas, will we be monitoring places like Gateway 14, for example, going forwards?
That would make sense, wouldn't it? Yeah, I think where we've got areas of development, particularly if they're industrial, then that might well be a suitable place for the application of the passive testing, just to monitor levels there. We don't expect, because of the way that planning works for those type of schemes, that they will derive excessive levels, because we do have, in other parts of in Baber, for example, there are industrial estates where the threshold's not met, so we wouldn't expect, by virtue of the fact there's an industrial estate there, that the threshold would be met, but we'll put passive monitoring in there just to ensure that that's the case. I'm looking to officers to kind of nod a little bit. They're not nodding. I'm a bit upset. All right, let's see what they have to say.
As part of the planning process for any new development, there's detailed environmental impact assessment, so the developer should be doing that work, which we then appraise. But on top of that, yes, we have already expanded our network to include particularly around Claydon, Blakenham area, and going up to Stowmarket. So it's a mixture of the two, basically. But
any further questions? Well, just one from me then. In terms of air quality, we often talk about sort of traffic and industrial sources. What about agricultural sources? How does that feature in the strategy? Because obviously that is the kind of key one that we tend to come across anecdotally out in the countryside.
Mainly as a background source of emission. We don't experience what's called fen blow in the fens, where you get huge expanses of field and dust coming off the fields. That's not a big issue around here. So it is mainly a background contributory source, harvest time, throwing up dust, that sort of thing, and emissions from vehicles, etc. But it's accounted for, but within the background emissions, which are all mapped within the strategy.
Yeah, I suppose I was thinking more of sort of livestock emissions rather than dust and so forth.
This only covers 7 key prescribed pollutants: lead, nitrogen dioxide, sulfur dioxide, carbon monoxide, 1,3-butadiene, benzene, and one other that I can't remember off the top of my head. But they're not covering emissions, particularly from livestock, methane or CO2, methane principally.
Okay, understood. Any other questions? Councillor Scarf, Councillor Caston, do you have any questions on this one? No? So we can open this up for debate if required. Anyone want to debate this item? No, it all seems fairly straightforward. So I will then just read out the recommendation. 3.1, it's recommended that Cabinet approves the adoption of the Joint Air Quality Strategy presented in Appendix A. I'll now ask the Governance Officer to conduct the vote.
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now in progress. Thank you, Chair. That is 7 votes for. That's unanimous.
Thank you very much. So the last item on the agenda is item 14. You're right. Okay. Sorry, 2 more items. So last item on the open agenda is item 14, update on the biodiversity working group. So this is from me. So the biodiversity working group was one of a number of working groups we set up when we came into administration back in 2023. It did meet regularly, and the work of that group informed officers in formulating our work in biodiversity and nature recovery. But it does seem to us now that that work is now done. the work has moved on into grant schemes and policies, and there's little value in continuing with that working group, but it requires a Cabinet decision to close it down. We do now have a lead member for nature recovery, Councillor Dan Pratt. So what I'm proposing is that we now decide to close down the biodiversity working group for the time being. I'll make that proposal. Could I have a seconder for that? Councillor Weller? And we can, unless anyone wants to debate that, we can move, I think, Tim, go ahead. Councillor Weller.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. I don't want to debate it, but I just want to pay tribute and thank the members of the cross-party members of the biodiversity working group for their for turning up for healthy discussion and debate and contributing to the policies and formulation of the grants that we put in place that you've referred to. I just wanted to put that on record, and thanks to them. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely echo that. Thank you to everyone who was involved in that group. And it's come up with some really good outcomes, I think. So we have a recommendation, we have a seconder, so I think we can now move to the vote.
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now in progress. Thank you, Chair. That is 7 votes for. That's unanimous.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we now move on to item 15, which is exclusion of the public, which term includes the press. So we need to first consider whether, pursuant to Part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972, the public should be excluded from the meeting for the business specified below, on the grounds that if the public were present during this item, it is likely there would be the disclosure to them of exempt information as indicated against the item. The author of the report proposed to be considered in Part 2 of the agenda is satisfied that the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information. So in terms of moving to the closed part of the meeting, can I have a proposer and a seconder for this? Councillor Stringer, you're proposing, and Councillor Weller, you are seconding. So we'll now vote by show of hands. All those in favour of moving into closed session? That's carried. So we will now stop the live stream and go into a closed session.